Joining us now, CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, and Cotler Wunsh, Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism. Guys, thanks for joining us. Andy, I want to start with you. What the FBI director says regarding moving quickly to mitigate what they're seeing right now, given the increase, what does that mean?
Well, Phil, it can mean a whole bunch of different things depending on the sort of threat that the FBI is focused on. So if they have credible information about a specific threat, that will prompt an investigation by the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force in the community where that threat exists. The Joint Terrorism Task Forces, there's about 200 of them around the country. They are made up of FBI agents and local partners for exactly this purpose. But on the other end of the spectrum, it may simply mean reaching out to state and local officials or community officials, people in the faith-based community, to explain what these threats are, to help people understand what the threats are and to protect themselves during times of elevated risk.
You know, Michal, you just returned from Israel. Your children, I believe, are serving. Is that right?
I live there. I actually just came to be able to engage here.
Thank you for what you do and for what they are doing right now as well. Can you speak to, it's one thing to combat this hate after you see it. It's another thing to work to change it from the inside out. Can you talk about that work in a moment like this?
Well, I'll say the hate that we just saw is awful in the case of the story that we just about this little 6-year-old boy. I'll say that with the genocidal terrorists that bludgeoned and murdered and raped and burned, that tore babies out of their mothers' arms just last Saturday morning as we were celebrating the Sabbath and a festival of joy in Israel that turned into living hell for thousands. We know that there are 199 abducted, but we also know that thousands were murdered and thousands are lying in the hospitals. That kind of genocidal hate, I'd say, fueled by a deep hatred, not only for the state of Israel, but for Jews. And the Hamas charter, just like Mein Kampf, actually stipulates clearly that its goal is to annihilate the state of Israel and to murder Jews. That kind of hate, I think, is not one we can understand.
Here in the United States, also, how do you combat it most effectively, do you believe?
I think that one of our biggest challenges is to identify, it's part of the reason that I'm here, that it's the same anti-Semitic hate that actually enabled or fueled denial, justification, excusing for those heinous crimes, for the murder of entire families, for piling up 20 young boys one on the other and igniting them in front of their parents. If there is somebody that cannot condemn that unequivocally, then there is not anything that we can do without identifying the anti-Semitism that fuels it. In order to be able to address or identify anything, we have to first define it. And anti-Semitism is defined not only as what we see here on the ground in protests and what we hear as "we are Hamas," or on university campuses where we hear legitimization of what it was that happened last Saturday, but actually, in many ways, the understanding that anti-Zionism is our modern form of anti-Semitism. It's imperative that we understand that if we're going to be able to identify and combat it.
Andrew, from a law enforcement perspective, I mean, what Michal is laying out right now, how complicated is this moment, given kind of the various threads, platforms, all of the different dynamics fueling this?
It's incredibly complicated, Phil. It's, it's primary in the role of every counterterrorism official in this country is watching events overseas, understanding that terrorist attacks overseas can often inspire or drive reactionary attacks here in the homeland. So that's what they're looking for. I can guarantee that the FBI is reaching out to their partners in the Jewish community and the Muslim community with concern over crimes like we saw in Chicago over the weekend. In addition, they're talking to informants, to sources of information. They're helping state and local officials protect locations that might be at greater risk. There's no question in my mind that the folks in the counterterrorism division at the FBI are working 24/7 right now with their eyes on this potential threat.
All right, Andrew McCabe and Michal Cotler Wunsh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And CNN This Morning continues right now.